I was thinking about Paradise Lost again today. In book 4, just before Satan sees Adam and Eve, they are reclining in the garden. She's like laying on his chest, and they're sort of like in this picturesque scene of utter, sublime, rational perfection. And they get along with each other, of course, perfectly. Sin has not entered the world yet. And then Satan, after infiltrating the garden, looks upon them, and his reaction is really quite telling. Let's compare Satan's justification of what he's about to do to Adam and Eve with Adam's speech that joins right after it, where he's advocating for obedience to God. In book 4, beginning approximately at line 400, Satan begins his speech first. He's just gazed on Adam and Eve, and he's going to respond in jealousy. He says, "O hell, what do mine eyes with grief behold? Into our room of bliss thus high advanced, creatures of other mold, earthborn perhaps, not spirits, yet to heavenly spirits bright little inferior, whom my thoughts pursue with wonder and could love. So lively shines in them divine resemblance, and such grace the hand that formed them on their shape hath poured." Satan's saying, they're so beautiful, I could love them. But he won't, right? I could love them. So he acknowledges that he knows that intellectually, but he won't. Ah, gentle pair, ye little think how nigh your change approaches, when all these delights will vanish and deliver you to woe. More woe, the more now your taste is of joy. Happy, but for so happy ill secured. Long to continue, and this high seat your heaven, ill fenced for heaven to keep out such a foe as is now entered. Interesting, right? He's like, oh, you don't have any idea what's about to happen to you. I wonder why this place wasn't fenced better. Heaven didn't create Eden in such a way that I couldn't get in. So here I am. So one has to wonder, there's Satan casting doubt even in his speeches to himself, saying, well, perhaps this world wasn't made the right way. Yet, no purposed foe, I am no purposed foe to you, whom I could pity thus forlorn, though I unpitied. League with you I seek, and mutual amity, so straight, so close, that with you must dwell, or you with me. In other words, like the devil's saying, I want to be close to you, or you close to me, one way or the other. And since, of course, the devil cannot enter into the earthly paradise and stay, he's going to want to drag Adam and Eve down to hell with him. You got to worry when the devil says, I want to be in league with you. Henceforth, my dwelling haply may not please, like this fair paradise your sense. You can almost hear the dripping envy. Yet such accept your Maker's work. He gave it to me, which I as freely give. Hell shall unfold to entertain you to her widest gates. Interesting diabolical play on what Jesus says in the New Testament, right? You have freely received, freely give. Well, the devil is saying here, accept your Maker's work. This is God's doing. God made me, after all. God made this place. He hasn't fenced it in very well. And so what happens is God's fault. So you might as well accept it. It's not my fault. Hell shall unfold to entertain you to her widest gates, and send forth all her kings. There will be room, not like these narrow limits, to receive your numerous offspring, if no better place. Thank him who puts me loath to this revenge on you, who wrong me not, for him who wronged. Thank him who puts me loath to this revenge. In other words, Satan is saying, if you're surprised or annoyed, or if you have grief about what's about to happen to you, thank God. God's the one that did it. He made me as I am. He made this place ill-fenced as it is. It's God's fault. He's the one who wronged me. Interesting, right? He wronged me. Now I have to take revenge on him. And since he beat me up and threw me out of heaven, I have to take revenge this way. So Milton writes a few lines later, so spake the fiend, and with necessity the tyrant's plea excused his devilish deeds. The tyrant, the wicked one, who pities himself and makes out of the situation a false necessity. Well, I'm doing this evil thing because I had to do it. How many times do we see tyrants do that? And how many times do we become the tyrants ourselves? Oh, well, I had to, commit adultery with this other woman. You don't understand how badly that my wife treated me. I had to cheat on that test because, after all, you don't understand how ridiculous the class is and how absurd the requirements are and how difficult my life is. I had to steal because you don't understand how difficult I've had it in life. The tyrant's plea, the wicked agree with the devil when they say, as I'm about to do something evil, if you have a grievance for it, blame God. He's the one who made these things as they are. And that's constantly the devil's refrain throughout the entire poem, is he's saying, well, it's not my fault. I could have made things better. And that reflects, of course, his desire to be Lord and creator of all. And of course, he can't. Now, just on the next page here in this book, just a few lines later, beginning about 4:12, Adam makes a speech to Eve. And so we kind of zoom in past the devil and we see Adam and Eve sitting there reclining together. And Adam is going to rejoin or present some like admonition to Eve. And he says this, he says, "Sole partner and sole part of all these joys, dearer thyself than all. Needs must the power that made us and for this ample world be infinitely good, and of his good as liberal and free as infinite, that raised us from the dust and placed us here in all this happiness, who at his hand hath nothing merited, nor can perform aught whereof he hath need. He who requires from us no other service than to keep this easy charge of all the trees in paradise that bear delicious fruit so various, not to taste that only tree of knowledge, planted by the tree of life." Adam begins in gratitude. He begins by observing the garden around him and its manifold delights. He says God must not only be infinitely powerful and infinitely creative, but also so prolifically gratuitous, so generous that he gave all of this to us. So therefore, let us obey him. He's given us only this one prohibition. But have you ever wondered why God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil anyway? I mean, you could imagine the garden without it. It doesn't really matter whether you take this story literally and, think that there was a guy, my name is Adam, that kind of thing, or if you take it totally symbolically. Either way, it is true. Either way, it's true, right? You could think of this like God could have made a garden without the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in it. So why didn't he just do that? It's a very common question that I get. Couldn't God have made a world in which Adam and Eve had free will, but they simply were not able to sin because there was nothing that God had prohibited them to do? Well, Adam continues. He says, "Of knowledge planted by the tree of life, so near grows death to life. Whate'er death is, some dreadful thing, no doubt. For well thou knowest, God has pronounced it death to taste of that tree." Adam doesn't know what death is. He's innocent of that. And so he just says, well, it must be something bad. He says, "God hath pronounced it death to taste that tree, the only sign of our obedience left. Among so many signs of power and rule conferred upon us, and dominion given over all other creatures that possess earth, air, and sea." So this is a sign of our limited power and dominion. So there's a line in Augustine where he says that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was placed in the garden to show that we were lords and not gods. Interesting, right? What a beautiful way to say it. We were lords and not gods. Man is indeed Lord of creation, given dominion. All of creation was made for man's enjoyment and use. And yet, there is not unlimited authority. Man himself is not God. Man is not creator. And so there is a boundary on his actions. So why did God create that tree? Well, let us not think hard one easy prohibition, who enjoy free leave so large to all things else, and choice unlimited of manifold delights. But let us ever praise him and extol his bounty, following our delightful task, to prune these growing plants, to tend these flowers, which were toilsome, yet with thee were sweet. So why is it there? As a sign of their obedience, as a sign that they are subject to God, that they themselves are not gods nor creators of the wonderful paradise in which they live. And then, of course, Adam takes the opportunity at the end, as he has in the beginning. It's a sort of semi-chiastic structure where in the beginning he compliments Eve, and then in the end he ends by complimenting Eve again, saying, well, working out here in this garden might possibly be toilsome, except that I'm with you, and then everything becomes sweet. Now, listen before we go to Eve's reply to him, because not only is Adam, before the corruption of sin, this kind of masculine example of functioning reason, right? This is not all given to him by divine revelation. He's not reading from the scriptures. He's simply looking upon what he has around him. He's taking what divine revelation he does have, which is, if you eat of this, you will die. And he's using his reason to make this wonderful, beautiful, and true speech about why that tree is even there in the first place. And he says, essentially, well, I don't know what death is, but the reason we should obey God is because he is so generous, and he has been so gratuitous, and he is so beautiful, and we have our pick of almost anything else. So let's not think this one single prohibition hard. So it's not out of fear of being hurt or fear of consequences of hell that he really fears. He doesn't understand the consequences. He fears God because of God's great goodness and his holiness. Now look how Eve, as the divine receptacle of Adam's leadership, responds. To whom thus Eve replied, O thou, for whom and from whom I was formed, flesh of thy flesh, and without whom am to no end, my guide and head, what thou hast said is just and right. So she compliments him by saying, I came from you. I exist for you. I follow you as my guide and head. This is classic Milton's Eve before the fall. You have this beautiful, sublime submissiveness to her, where she follows Adam without any kind of like desire to usurp his authority. In fact, she sees his authority as an image of God's authority. And indeed it is. That is what Adam is doing here. He is using his reason to image and to flesh out and to make present God's authority. So she says, I am flesh of your flesh. Without you, I am to no end. Without you, I don't have a purpose. Like, my purpose is to help and to be by your side and to be your companion. Eve says, for we to him indeed all praises owe, and daily thanks. I chiefly, who enjoy so far the happier lot, enjoying thee preeminent by so much odds, while thou like consort to thyself canst nowhere find. So she also ends her reception, her submissiveness to this, with a compliment to Adam by saying, well, of course I'm going to follow you. I exist for you. I want to be with you. And you, I enjoy this garden even more because for all the delights that it contains, I also get to enjoy you. And she says, well, I sort of wonder about you at the end because you, like consort to yourself, cannot find, which is kind of poetic irony. It's sort of like she's not necessarily wrong because Adam and Eve are not equal, right? In the sense of being the same. Adam is the head and she is the body, right? Adam's the leader and she's the follower. And so you could develop that theme in other places in Paradise Lost. But she's saying like, well, there's no one the same as you. But of course, that's ironic because Eve was made precisely because Adam did not find one like him among the animals. And God has said it's not good that man should be alone, right? Beautiful, beautiful passage out of Paradise Lost. So that's an interesting contrast, isn't it? The comparison of the devil's tyrant's plea of like, well, God made the world this way. That's why I have to act in this way, right? It's the excuse of what? Maybe every sin that we all commit, right? Whenever we're trying to find an excuse for it, we just say, well, God's the one that set up the world. It shouldn't have been this way. If I wasn't going to be a thief, I shouldn't have been so poor. If I wasn't going to be a scammer, I shouldn't have been, born into this kind of a culture and this kind of a family. Whatever. It's a tyrant's excuse, right? Versus Adam saying, look at the world. Look at the order that God made. We owe him fealty. We owe him love.